In today's show, the Trailblazers have found their stride in the second half of the season, and we dig into what's real, what they're good at, and places they can still improve. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, I want to dig in a little bit into what the Blazers are. Because what they are is pretty darn decent. In the second half of the season, since we flipped over to game 42 and the Blazers beat the Bulls on January 19th, Portland is a team that takes care of business. They win games. In fact, they are 17-11 since January 19th. If we were doing this from the beginning of the season, they would have played, you typically say like, about 20 or 25 games before you say it's real, before you say it's sustainable, before you say a big enough sample size. If this had been the beginning of the season, you would say, yeah, they've played a chunk of enough games at this level to say, okay, this is kind of what they are. Obviously, you take the whole season into account to some extent, and I will be intentionally in this particular episode talking about only the stretch of the season where they've turned it around. I know what I'm doing, but in part I'm doing that because the question isn't like, were they bad through the first 41 games? It's now that they've kind of figured it out, how much of this is real, how much of this is their identity, how much of this is who they're going to be moving forward. And that's what I want to dig into today. We'll talk sort of big picture stuff. I got some nitty gritty stats things I think will really help crystallize and paint a stronger picture of what this team truly is. And then I want to talk about kind of what this means, because it's not just... it doesn't end with them making the play-in, right? The goal of this team is not to finish 10th in the Western Conference in 2025, right? It's not to make one postseason. It's to, like, regardless of whether they do or do not make the play-in, which I think is in many ways irrelevant to what I'm discussing here today. It's what have they found in the second half of the season that is a sustainable foundation for what they want to build moving forward. We'll get into all of that because I think so many of the decisions they make moving forward will need to be informed by what they think is real and what they think is like a strength and what they think is a weakness moving forward. Let's start with this big picture stuff that we know. 17-11. And certainly I have harped on this particular program. If you're an everydayer, shout out to my regular listeners, shout out to my everydayers. I appreciate y'all. That the Blazers, like, a key to their success during this stretch is that they beat up on the bad teams and they have not had nearly as much success against the good teams. They've struggled recently against teams with winning records, losing 10 straight games against teams that are above 500. They've taken care of business, 11 consecutive wins against teams that are below 500 when they walk into the Moda Center since January 19th. They handle business. They handle biz, to be sure. I don't want to erase this. I don't want to wand this away as magic schedule, easy opponents, fake March, magic March, NBA nonsense. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for two reasons. One, I think beating teams that are bad every single night is what good teams do. You take care of business. And I think just finding ways to win games against the teams that are poor in this league, that's a path to the playoffs. Taking care of business against bad teams is a path to the playoffs, period. Obviously, and also, I'm not trying to sell you on, and that's why I'll erase this too, or why I don't want to wand it away too. I'm not trying to sell you on the Blazers being an elite basketball team. I think that would just be foolish. That's not what I'm after here. I'm not trying to tell you that this is actually a championship level team. I don't even know what their postseason future looks like beyond this year, right? There's too many variables between, this March and next March for me to feel comfortable about making any predictions there. I don't think this is one of the elite teams. I've watched them closely for years. This isn't one of them. So I'm not trying to, while I'll say maybe they've struggled against the best teams, I don't care about that. what I care about, largely because I'm not trying to sell you on them being the Denver Nuggets or the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm trying to sell you on them being a decent team that has some stuff that they have figured out. They're 17-11. They have since January 19th. That's over the Blazers' last 28 games. They have the 9th best net rating in the league, ninth best point differential in the league in terms of points allowed per 100 possessions versus points scored per 100 possessions. That's via cleaning the glass. The 9th best differential in the league. In fact, cleaning the glass has an expected wins, which is how many wins you're expected to have based on your differential. The Blazers 17-11, and for the first time, but throughout the first half of the season, the Blazers had more wins than they should have based on their differential. Right? They had they won 13 games, but they kind of looked like a 9-win team. Since January 19th, their differential suggests that they actually should have won 18 games. They should be 18-10. Like they have, and in part because they kind of handled some bad teams during the stretch where they've played bad teams. Point differential is a pretty good indicator of how quality you are. They've figured some stuff out. So what have they figured out? I think the big picture, like headline stuff, is that Denny Avdia and Toumani Camara are a formidable forward duo that provides enough of a defensive baseline and some versatility, particularly with Avdia on offense, that you can be good with those two. How good, like if you're asking that high-level question, that is something that they will answer in the future. But can those two dudes be starters on a very good team? Absolutely, absolutely. Denny Avdia has been the Blazers' best player of the season. Toumani has been one of the best defenders in the league this season. You need to surround those guys with shooting and probably some more off the dribble juice, because as much as special as Denny is on offense, individual shot creation and like high level playmaking is not where he is. He is a downhill aggressive driver who can be a fun playmaker, but you'd want to add some more playmaking around him. And while Toumani Camara has taken great strides as a shooter, you'd still want people that are a little more dynamic on offense around him. But can you build a really good team around Denny and Tu as your starting forwards? Absolutely. And they have the versatility that you could add on either side of them and kind of get away with it as long as you added the right skills, shooting and playmaking. Like you could say, okay, just kidding, Toumani is a 2 on defense, right? Like he could be your shooting guard on defense, but like nominally a forward on offense. Obviously, I think positions matter, but skill sets are much more important. I think we know that. Denny and Tu is a formidable, useful duo. The other thing we know is that Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe have taken strides. They are better than they were at the beginning of the season. Those two players have improved. They're young. That's what young players do. They don't always improve perfectly, like with perfect linear progress. And obviously, like their progress will not be linear moving forward either. They will take steps back and steps forward. But those two gentlemen have been better. And like you can play, I think during Shaedon Sharpe's rookie years, one of the worst big minute players in the league. During Scoot Henderson's rookie years, one of the worst big minute players in the league. You can't say that about them now. They're often positives, if not just straight up neutral, but they've been during this stretch like part of a functional team on both ends of the floor. I think Sharpe, he has his warts on offense. He's not a great shooter, but he's improved so much as a cutter, or excuse me, as a driver and finisher. He's kind of finding his way as a cutter. I think he's had some moments where he showed he can be a rebounder. I think he's making strides as a playmaker. Like even the things that he's not very good at, he's showing he's getting a little bit better, even with the obvious things that he still can get better at. Obviously, like if he was a high-level jump shooter, he'd be an incredibly good player already, and he is not quite 22. Scoot Henderson is, he followed an awesome game with a bad game the way young players do, but he's taken such strides to just be like a positive player. I think there is if you're like zooming out, like how good can Denny and Tu be? Like what's the ceiling of Scoot and Shaedon? That is a hard thing to know, and I think that will inform a lot of like the Blazers' ultimate outcomes here. But in terms of like building a quality basketball team, how they got here, those four gentlemen seem to check a lot of boxes. I think you've seen some signs from Donovan Clingan, particularly since DeAndre Ayton was out. Ayton was playing his best basketball before he got hurt, and he was a big part of the Blazers' turnaround in the second half of the season. But since Donovan Clingan, DC has stepped into that starting role, I think he has shown a path to being a pretty good defensive center with obvious challenges. Like, how is he going to score in the league remains a pretty big question mark. And even then, he even with that, like one side of the ball, kind of a mystery, pretty effective at his age, right? And when he can play to his strengths on defense, can be awesome. Still struggles a little bit guarding in space and guarding away from the rim. But when he does what he does well, rebound the ball and defend the paint, he looks really good at it. And you feel like, okay, yeah, this dude could be a foundational piece. He's not going to be able to play against every other opponent and all of those things, but he has some stuff. And I think the other thing they've discovered during the second half of the season is a little more Anthony Simons as a shooting guard, as opposed to being a primary creator on offense. We've seen more and more of Anthony Simons as an off-ball guy, whether it's Denny as an initiator or Scoot as an initiator. We've seen some really strong games from Anthony Simons just as an off-ball shooter. He's probably in his perfect world that, right? He's a guy who toggles to be on the ball a little bit, but plays a lot of two-guard. He's probably a high-level six man in a perfect situation. Now, the Blazers don't have that perfect situation because Simons is probably still better than both of the other young guards for now, and it's weird to move a player like entering his prime. Like, you go to the bench now, 25-year-old Anthony Simons, because like it just, in a perfect world, the two young guards would be like so clearly better or more effective at certain things than Simons that it wouldn't even be a question and Ant would come off the bench. But I also don't think, like, if your solution is, how about Anthony Simons comes off the bench but still closes the game, that's the CJ McCollum conversation all over again. It's like, what are you actually solving? Is your goal to solve the first 7 minutes of the game, or like the larger roster construction? In any case, Anthony Simons as an off-ball player has been effective. And all of that mixed together, quality forwards, young players making the steps forward, and, a quality offensive player finding where he fits into the offense. And Simons, you're 17-11. So what are the other indicators for this team? Let's talk numbers to know in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, let's talk Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy, and it's a great way to get in on the action during basketball season. It's a great place, if not the best place, for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to $1,000, 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, including right here in Oregon, and it lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So if, as we get into baseball season, as the NBA season winds down, you can get in on all of it. Prize Picks make it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and so then you can have things to cheer for all evening long as you sit down on your couch or sit down in the arena and watch some games. And when you win, your money's hits your bank account in as little as 15 minutes, so there's no waiting around. Plus, they got deals like Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%, giving you even more value in your lineup. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win. You just need to play your first $5 lineup, and Prize Picks will give you $50 to play with. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by the good folks over at Hungry Root. And the folks at Hungry Root, they know the truth. It can be hard to shop for groceries to meet all of your needs. And not just all of your needs, all of your goals. If you want to find time to buy groceries and also buy groceries that are healthy and also find time to cook those healthy groceries, well, it can be a lot. And Hungry Root wants to make it easy for you. So why not let them be a game changer? It's an easy way to eat healthy without all that stress. It's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on your tastes and health goals. So if you got some anti-inflammatory needs, or you're looking for high protein meals or even gluten-free options, they'll find that. And the best part is every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. So you're getting quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It can be a huge time saver. It can make healthy eating so much simpler. So if you want to find out how much you're going to love Hungry Root, the only way to do it is to try it. And for a limited time, you can get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. The code is LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. All right. So I think we know the big picture stuff. The Blazers they've been effective. They've been they've been, they've taken care of business against bad teams, but also their point differential suggests even in those wins against bad teams that they're just like, they're a quality team. I'm not trying to sell you on them being an elite team. What I'm trying to sell you on is them being a vastly improved team that can build from here. So what are they good at? And again, I'm going to give you numbers that are from January 19th on. I understand the full season and the whole year is a better sample and a larger sample to take. And in general, I'm a believer in taking the larger sample. So I don't even want to add the caveat here that these are small samples. What I want to add the caveat here is this is a selected sample. This is a bias selection. I am picking from when did the Blazers get good? What are the numbers like when they got good? But I think it is indicative in the very least because it's a 28 game sample. And if this were the first 28 games of the season, you'd say this might be real, or this is who they are. You would say this is like identity defining. The middle of the season is a little bit different because teams changed post trade deadline and priorities change. But I think this is big enough to be indicative of like when the Blazers figured it out. In what ways did they figure it out? So let's talk about that. Since January 19th, they're third in defense. These numbers are courtesy of cleaningtheglass.com. Shout out to Ben Falk at Cleaning the Glass, the indispensable stats website. They're third in defense since January 19th. They're 17th in offense. They're an elite defensive team and a slightly below average offensive team, and that has made what that has turned them into is a team that takes care of business against bad teams. On offense, they're 21st in effective field goal percentage. That's you bottom 10 in the league in just like making shots. Effective field goal percentage is the field goal percentage accounting for the value of 3-pointers, which of course are worth 50% more than 2-pointers. They turn the ball over too much. They're 29th in turnover percentage. That's bottom 2 in the league, 29th out of 30 teams. That's a big deal. Taking care of the ball is going to be part of their identity moving forward. If nothing, like maybe not like high level, but you just can't be a good offensive team and turn the ball over as much as they do, unless you're like an elite shooting team that plays really fast, right? Then you can maybe get away with it. But if you're not a great shooting team, you need to value possessions. They get extra possessions though. They're second in offensive rebound rate over the last 28 games. This has always been that one of their identities is over the last couple years is that they've been a good offensive rebounding team and a bad defensive rebounding team. That remains the case, but getting second chances, particularly for a team that's not an elite shooting team, huge. And they're a crash team, right? They go after offensive rebounds. They are early in the year, they crashed way too much and their transition defense suffered for it. I think they figured out a little bit the balance there about when to get back and when to crash, but they remain an elite offensive rebounding team. That's huge. And they're 8th in free throw rate. They get to the free throw line. So much of that is Denny, right? He's just a beast and gets to the free throw line. But it is also even Jeremy Grant, when he has deeply struggled, has had his moments. Although he has been during this particular stretch not particularly good at getting to the free throw line. Only 2 such games during this 28 game stretch where he shot more than 5 free throws. But Scoot has improved in that regard. Shaedon Sharpe has improved a little bit, although he leaves a little something to be desired there. But like they have, because they get offensive rebounds and they get putbacks, and because they have some downhill guys in Scoot and Shea and particularly Denny Avdia, they're 8th in free throw rate. Getting easy buckets like this, I'm giving you the 4 factors, right? Making shots that are the most valuable, getting extra possessions with rebounds, keeping the possessions you have with turnovers, and how often do you get to the easy ones, the free throws. Those are your 4 factors. Shout out to Dean Oliver and Basketball on Paper. The offense is propped up a lot by the fact that they get to the free throw line and get offensive rebounds. That's why they're right around league average, 17th, slightly below average since January 19th, over the last 28 games. On defense, though, they kind of rock. They really do. They kind of rock. They're 4th in effective field goal percentage, an elite team of just like preventing shots from going in. They're 11th in forcing turnovers, which in opponent turnover percentage, an above average, flirting with the top 10, an above average team in forcing turnovers. That can fuel them a little bit because you get out and run, or at the very least you just preventing shots. They're 18th in offensive rebound percentage. That doesn't seem great, right? It's still below average, but it is a huge jump from where they have been on the season and where they've been the last couple of years. Just being league average in grabbing defensive rebounds, opponent offensive rebound rate, is your defensive rebound rate. They're 18th. If they flirted with league average in defensive rebound rate, if they were an above average team as a defensive rebounding team, they'd be awesome. They'd be awesome. Their defense would be phenomenal. Giving up second chances is really their problem. They turn the ball over too much and they give up second chances. If they just prevented that, they would be, I mean, they're already during the stretch third on defense, but they would be elites and you'd feel really good about it. They're 26th in free throw rate. They foul a little bit too much. Part of that is the style of defense they play. They put pressure away from the rim. They play with some pressure. I would say they've dialed back their like crazy defensive ball pressure of the last few years to play a slightly less aggressive scheme, but they still play pretty aggressive and they let guys go out and pressure the ball away from the rim. They just don't send two to the ball as often. And I would say they've even dialed back some of their pressing stuff, but I think they've also mostly gone away from playing zone. They're mostly playing various versions of man-to-man with some switching principles and some not. Some what they call 55, which is where you switch everything. You'll see them hold up the fist if they play zone. In terms of shots, though, and I think this is key a little bit to sort of learn about the Blazers, and then I want to share a very telling stat that I think is probably the most notable thing I learned during my research. The Blazers, on offense, have what Clean the Glass calls the number one effective field goal percentage in terms of location. And what that charts is, if a league average player took the shots your team generates, where would you rank in effective field goal percentage? Well, because the Blazers are second in rim rate and 14th in three-point rate, they're a slightly below average team in taking three-pointers, and they live at the rim. Offensive rebounds, driving to the rim. They live at the rim and they take slightly above average, like basically league average in three-point attempts. They're number one in the league in effective field goal percentage, in location effective field goal percentage. If they were good at finishing at the rim, which they aren't, they're 24th in the league finishing at the rim. They do not convert their putbacks, but if they did, and they're 19th in three-point accuracy, if they were a better shooting team and a better finishing team, they would be good on offense because of the shots they generate. They get offensive rebounds, they get chances to put them back, like see Donovan Clingan missing 6 putbacks in a row, see them kind of get caught up inside missing shots and some finishing woes from Denny and Scoot a little bit sometimes in the half courts. Anthony Simons not getting all the way to the rim, Jeremy Grant forgetting how to make 2-pointers, period. They get to the rim a bunch, they just don't finish, and they shoot about league average and from three in terms of attempts, but they're not as accurate as they want to be. But the shot diet is good. On defense, because they give up offensive rebounds and because they do probably give up more drives to the rim than your eyeballs would suggest, they're 26th in opponents' rim rate and they're third in opponents' three-point rate. They do not give up a ton of corner threes. They give up a ton of above the break threes. That's a challenge for them a little bit. They give up those above the break threes, but they are, and so if that by that same token, that locational effective field goal percentage, if teams were to shoot a league average from three and league average at the rim or league average from the shots the Blazers give up, they would be 21st in effective field goal percentage. They are functionally fourth. So is there some Jedi mind tricks at play? Yeah. There's a little bit of special magic leading to the Blazers being an elite defensive team. Let's talk about that. I got a really telling stat, and we'll talk a little bit about where the Blazers build from this foundation from here, because even once I reveal this stat to you, I think there's reasons to be very optimistic about what they have and what they might, and what informs what they might be. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, let's talk Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you can also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Still a pass first point guard, still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. I mentioned there's a little Jedi mind tricks, and this is the most telling, most interesting stat that I uncovered during my research about the Blazers and where they've improved. I mentioned some of the locational effective field goal percentage. The idea if someone that shot the league average from all the spots on the court, the rim, the mid-range, the corner threes, above the break threes, short mid, long mid-range, floater range shots, where would the Blazers rank? And they'd be the 21st in effective and in location effective field goal percentage since January 19th. They're actually 4th. They've defended pretty well. But the actual part is doing a little bit of work here, because the Blazers are benefiting from some shooting luck in a way that I just didn't know. The Blazers are slightly above average in preventing corner threes. They give up the 11th most corner threes in the league since January 19th. They're 11, and I guess in opponent corner 3-point percentage rate, they're 11th. They're above average, right? They're not giving up a ton of these. They're not hemorrhaging corner threes. Their defense does a good job in general of preventing these, but nobody is making them. The league average on corner 3-point attempts this season, according to Clean the Glass, is 39.3%. It's the most valuable shot in the game. It's the shortest three-pointer. They're typically catch and shoot threes, and they're typically open threes because the way that teams play defense. Teams don't, you don't see a lot of guys. You don't see guys take off the dribble threes from the corner. Very, very, very rare. And you don't often see guys take heavily contested threes because of the way defenses play and the way that offenses work to manipulate to get, guys shots in the deep corner, fully spaced out, leveraging the value of that shot. They are quality looks, and they're the shortest looks, and they're worth the most points from the closest while being closest to the rim. The league average is 39.3%. The Blazers on corner threes from their opponents have shot 31.3% on corner three-pointers since January 19th. Way the hell below league average. In fact, the second best corner 3-point defense team in the league is the Lakers at 34.6%. A 3% difference is 10%, right? It's on if you're talking about 31%. It's a massive change, right? It's a massive change. The Blazers are so far below the next team. Like this is the Jedi mind tricks. This is the what makes you think like, yeah, this might not be sustainable. But I don't want to wave this away and say like, oh, actually, if teams just shot normal from 3, like I think your eyeballs suggest, one, the Blazers aren't giving up a ton of these looks, above average in preventing them, and preventing just the volume of threes. Let's say they're back towards league average. I still think they're a pretty good defensive team. And in fact, over the last couple weeks, like I as I said, it's a selective stats. So they're 3rd in defense since January 19th. That has dipped a bunch over the last 2 weeks. And I think when we get to the end of the season, we'll say, okay, what were they looking at over the final 41 games? And obviously their next 4 games are against really good teams. I think it'll be telling when we get to the end of the year, when we do say we can split the season straight in half, cut it right down the middle and say, what were they second half of the season? I think you'll get a pretty good sense of this, and maybe this will come back a little bit. Teams will start making corner threes, and it's like, yeah, okay. But I don't think the Blazers are going to dip to being a bad defensive team. I just think like they might, from being 3rd, one of the elite defensive teams over this stretch, yeah, some of this might be schedule stuff. Some of this this is where like you're playing bad teams kind of shows up a little bit, right? Some of this just luck, shooting luck. And I think fans hate the word luck associated with their team, but that's part of it. Sometimes you get lucky. That's good. It's good. It's good to get lucky. Again, if they were giving up 1 million corner threes and this low percentage, I'd say, okay, they're in trouble. Because the volume is relatively low, I think you tick up a little bit on this, and the Blazers are something like, oh, they're the 9th or 11th best defense in the league. if they're like the 11th best defense in the league for an entire season and something like the 15th to 16th best offense, you're trending towards winning half your games. Like you're a 41 win team. And that's without adding any, that's without like, that's with just saying like, hey, you're talking like generally run it back. You get a little bit, like the luck changes a little bit. The roster looks almost identical and like nobody improves, but nobody declines. You're talking about winning half your games. You're talking about a team that finishes 500, like, or profiles as a 500 team. That is an important step forward if you're that. Obviously, if you clean this up a little bit, or obviously the way the spreads work, some teams are going to be better than others at this. But I just think the Blazers' gap from them to the second best team or second worst team, then their gap in general from the league average suggests that they're getting a little bit lucky here. I still think they profile as a pretty darn good defensive team. I think your eyeballs can see it, and something I'm going to watch very closely over the next little bit is like what kind of corner threes are they giving up? Are they really picking who shoots them? But in general, like guys who are taking these shots, the league average is league average. 39% is the league average. The average player shoots 39% on corner threes. I think you could imagine that. If the Blazers gave up 37%, they'd still be above league average, but it would be a massive change in their outcome. So what do they build from here? And I think that's the big question. I'll answer this to close the show. How good they can be it's so hard to know. Like, and I don't feel the need to make any predictions now about that because it's March. Who's Kevin Durant going to play for next year? Who else is going to be good in the West? Which teams are going to kind of fade in the playoffs and burn it down? Which teams are going to rise in the playoffs and add more talent? What's going to happen to a team like the New Orleans Pelicans? Do they want to be good? What are they going to do? There's just so much that remains to be seen with what the Blazers can be. Obviously, the Blazers are going to have a draft pick. They're going to have the opportunity to make trades. So many changes can happen between now and the fall, much less happen between this year's playoffs and next. I think the Blazers have the foundation to be much, much better than, certainly they're already much better than I thought they would be this season, and to improve on this just with natural internal improvement. The players you are banking on carrying an offense that has been slightly below average over the last 28 games are Scoot Henderson and Shane Sharp. They're not yet 22. You're counting on guys who are extremely young and extremely, this is the biggest growth guys make from, 19 to 23. This is the biggest jumps guys make in their game. The players that are like most likely to make vast improvements are also the players you're banking on being your best offensive players. So the fact that the offense isn't very good now, but you say like, well, Shaedon Sharp profiles if he hits his marks, like the Blazers is as maybe the Blazers' best offensive player. Scoot Henderson is going to be a good if he gets to where approaches what the best version of himself is. He's going to be a very helpful offensive player, and you feel comfortable about what that might look like. And even if they do nothing, I think they profile as being capable of being a pretty darn good defensive team. Like, even with very little changes to the personnel, and obviously some stuff's going to change between now and next year, and certainly now and next playoffs, I think they profile as like an above average, if not straight up good defensive team. Like, I would be very comfortable saying like, yeah, this is one of the top 12 defenses in the league. I mean, obviously depending on so many other things with the other 30 teams in the league. But like right now, if you asked me today, yeah, I'd say like, yes, I'm very comfortable with saying the Blazers will be one of the top 12 defensive team next year, if not better, right? If not better than that. But I'd be like, you don't twist my arm. This is an above average defense, right? Twist my arms. Yeah, they could flirt with top 5. That's the personnel they have. Especially if Don McCling takes some steps forward. I think what I've learned from this stretch is that the Blazers, first of all, they're better than I thought they would be by a lot. Better than I thought they would be by a lot. And a lot of what they do feels like it could be repeated, even with the Jedi mind trick corner 3-point shooting stuff, which I think is a big thing to keep an eye on. It doesn't feel like this thing is fragile. Nothing about what they've been doing feels deeply fragile. In fact, if they made more layups and had slightly better 3-point shooters, I think they would take a jump on offense. And if the 3-point shooting levels out a little bit, a drop on defense, they might be above average on both offensive defense for a 41 game stretch. I mean, I don't think they're going to magically add better shooting, but like, I think with minor personnel moves, they could profile as like a team that pretty easily wins half its games next year. I did not believe that in early January 2025. We're in the middle of March. I am not someone who's saying, championship in 2026 or anything like that. But what I am saying, or 2027 or whatever, but what I am saying is like the Blazers' path to being competitive is obvious, clear, and right in front of us. And if they were to make major moves, that would obviously change the calculation. But even if they make very minor ones, their path to being like legitimately competitive immediately seems pretty clear. Obviously, there are so many other factors that will determine how competitive, but do I think that this stretch suggests that they're pretty good? I absolutely do. I don't know if this, again, I wouldn't say proof of concept, but I will say clear vision and clear sustainable play, even with a little bit of drop off on defense. I think they profile as a pretty darn good team. And boy, go back and listen to the old podcasts. I have not thought that at any point this season. I am starting to believe, or at least starting to see why I was wrong. And I think that is as interesting as joining the group of believers. Join me for more programs the rest of the week. The Blazers play the Memphis Grizzlies on Wednesday evening. You're listening to Wednesday, March 19th show. You've made it to the very end. Come back for Thursday's program when we'll talk about the Grizzlies game. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.